Have you ever felt that God has placed something unique on your heart, a calling or purpose that feels bigger than anything you've ever imagined? Maybe there have been moments in your life where you felt a pull or an inner knowing that you were meant for something extraordinary, something that only you can do in the way God has designed. It might have been a quiet whisper or an overwhelming sense that you're being prepared for a purpose, and although you may not fully understand it yet, the sense of destiny is undeniable. Take a moment to reflect on those times when you felt that divine purpose stirring inside you. It could have been during a season of struggle, a moment of breakthrough, or even a simple day-to-day event. Perhaps you sensed that your life was about to shift, or that the pain you endured was preparing you for something greater. Recognize that these feelings are not by accident. They are God's way of guiding you toward a mission that is uniquely yours. We all have our own stories and journeys, but the one thing we share is that God has set a divine purpose for each of us. Sometimes we might not fully comprehend the significance of what we are meant to do, but as we look back at our lives, we can begin to understand how the pieces fit together, how the challenges, lessons, and victories have been preparing us for what's ahead. Today's message centers on the idea that God has a special purpose for each of His children, a task that only you can accomplish in the way that He has designed it. This divine calling is personal and unique to your life, and no one else can walk in the exact purpose God has ordained for you. Just as each person is created with individual gifts, talents, and passions, so too is the mission God has set before them. But here's the truth. Preparation for such a significant mission is not always easy. It often requires facing challenges, experiencing growth, and being obedient to God's specific guidance. Sometimes the path is unclear, and we wonder why we're going through certain difficulties. However, we can trust that every step is part of God's process to equip us for the task He's calling us to. In this message, we will explore how God prepares His chosen people for tasks that are irreplaceable. The preparation might not always be instant, and the journey may not always feel comfortable, but it is always purposeful. God's hand is at work in shaping you for what He has planned. As we delve into this topic, I want you to reflect on the unique calling God has placed on your life. Even in the midst of trials or confusion, remember that God is preparing you for something only you can fulfill. This is your purpose, and it's worth every moment of waiting, growing, and trusting in His timing. Stay with me as we explore how God prepares you for your divine destiny, step by step, and how you can embrace this journey with confidence and faith. Let's dive in together, trusting that He is working all things for your good and His glory. One of the most profound truths of our faith is that each of us has a specific calling, a purpose in God's kingdom that is uniquely tailored to who we are. Our mission is not interchangeable. It's an assignment designed specifically for us, crafted by the Creator before the foundation of the world. There's no one else who can fulfill the unique task God has set for us in the way He's intended. This calling is deeply personal and tied to our individual gifts, experiences, and passions. When we think of calling, we often imagine a grand task or specific ministry, but calling is not limited to ministry in the traditional sense. Your calling could be in the marketplace, the arts, education, business, or any number of areas where you can influence and carry out God's work. What makes it unique is that it's your task designed by God to fulfill a specific purpose in His greater plan. You might not always see the fullness of your calling right away, but understanding that God has designed it just for you is the first step in walking in your purpose. The truth is, this calling is not something that we choose on our own. It is revealed through the guidance of God, and it's often discovered through a combination of prayer, experience, and reflection. As we step into the roles and positions God has prepared for us, we learn more about ourselves, how we're wired, and the unique gifts He's entrusted to us. To better understand the nature of your unique calling, let's look at some key biblical figures who were called by God to specific pivotal tasks that only they could accomplish. Moses was called to lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, a task that seemed impossible. He was not a perfect leader, nor was he the most qualified in the world's eyes. He was a fugitive, reluctant to speak, and often doubted his own abilities. But God knew that Moses' unique background, his upbringing in Pharaoh's house, his time in the wilderness, and his intimate relationship with God had uniquely equipped him to lead God's people to freedom. Moses' calling required faith, obedience, and a willingness to trust God's plan despite his own insecurities. Exodus 3-4. David, a young shepherd, was chosen to be king of Israel not because of his stature or royal lineage, but because of his heart for God. God saw something in David that others didn't: a deep faith and a willingness to obey. David's journey from the fields of Bethlehem to the throne of Israel was full of struggles, but God used every season to prepare him. His time as a shepherd, protecting the sheep from wild animals, prepared him for leading God's people. 1 Samuel 16-17. His unique experiences and reliance on God set him apart for a divine purpose that was greater than what he could have imagined. Esther's calling was equally unique. A young Jewish woman who became queen of Persia, she found herself in a position of power at a critical time for her people. While she was initially placed in the palace for a different purpose, God used her courage and influence to save the Jews from a decree of destruction. Esther's background, her beauty, and her willingness to step forward despite the danger made her uniquely suited for her role. Book of Esther. God called her for a purpose at the perfect time, and her obedience brought about salvation for many. Each of these individuals had unique backgrounds, strengths, and experiences that God used to equip them for their roles. Moses' time in the wilderness, David's time as a shepherd, and Esther's position as queen, these were all part of God's preparation for them to fulfill their unique callings. What about you? What makes you unique? God has crafted you with a specific set of gifts, passions, and experiences that make you the perfect candidate to fulfill a task only you can accomplish. Think about your past, your personality, your struggles, and your strengths. These things aren't random. They are the raw materials God is using to prepare you for the mission ahead. Sometimes we get discouraged because we don't see ourselves as capable or qualified. We may compare ourselves to others and think, "I'm not as good as they are," or "I don't have the skills they have." But the truth is, God doesn't make mistakes. The qualities you have, the talents, the failures, the lessons you've learned are all part of what God has used to shape you for this moment in time. Take a moment to reflect. How has God uniquely prepared you for the work He has set before you? What experiences in your life, the hard moments and the victories, have shaped who you are? How can you use those experiences to step into your calling with confidence? Trust that God's purpose for your life is already in motion, and you are exactly who He needs for the job. Just as Moses, David, and Esther were called to their divine purpose at the right time, so too are you being prepared for the mission only you can fulfill. God is not just the one who calls us to a purpose, He is also the one who prepares us for that purpose. Often, when we sense that God has a mission for us, we want to leap into it immediately, but God's preparation process requires patience and trust. Preparation is not always an easy road. It involves growth, transformation, and often a period of difficulty or struggle. However, this process is essential because God is equipping us for the mission He has planned for us, ensuring that we are ready to handle the responsibility, challenges, and opportunities that will come with our divine calling. God prepares us in many ways, through life experiences, trials, failures, and even our deepest moments of pain. These are not random or accidental. They are part of God's divine plan to mold us into the people He has called us to be. Just as a blacksmith uses fire to refine metal, God often allows us to go through testing and trials to refine our character, strengthen our faith, and develop the qualities that will serve us in our mission. The key is to understand that preparation is a process. It often requires growth in patience, endurance, humility, and faith. God will take us through different stages, and sometimes we may not fully understand why we are going through certain challenges, but we can rest assured that each experience is part of God's loving and purposeful preparation for our divine destiny. Joseph's preparation. Genesis 37:41. Joseph's story is a powerful example of God's preparation process. Joseph was given a dream by God, showing that he would rise to a position of great authority. However, before he could fulfill that promise, Joseph had to endure many years of hardship. He was sold into slavery by his brothers, falsely accused and imprisoned. These years were not wasted. God was using every trial to refine Joseph's character, teaching him patience, leadership, and trust in God's timing. Joseph could not have stepped into the leadership role he was meant to have without the preparation of the years spent in hardship. In prison, Joseph learned how to interpret dreams, which would later be the key to his rise in Pharaoh's court. God used Joseph's trials, not to break him but to build him up into the man capable of handling the responsibility that would come with the dream God had given him. When Joseph finally rose to power, he was in a position to save not only his family but also the entire nation of Egypt from famine. But none of that would have been possible without the long process of preparation. His time of suffering was in fact a preparation for the destiny God had set for him. David's preparation. 1 Samuel 16:17. David's story is another example of God's preparation process. David was anointed as king while he was still a young shepherd, overlooked by his family and underestimated by others. However, before David could take his place on the throne, God had to prepare him for the challenges he would face as king. David's time as a shepherd was a time of preparation. He fought off lions and bears to protect his flock, developing both physical and spiritual strength. His victories in the wilderness prepared him for the battle against Goliath. His years of being pursued by King Saul honed his character and taught him to trust God in the midst of danger and uncertainty. God was preparing David to lead a nation, and through every trial, David's faith and dependence on God grew. David's preparation was not instantaneous. It took time, and it involved suffering, rejection, and struggle. But God was faithful throughout, shaping David into the man who would ultimately fulfill God's calling on his life. Just as God prepared Joseph and David for their purposes, He is also preparing you for the unique calling He has placed on your life. It's important to remember that preparation is a process, and that process often involves challenges and hardships. If you are in a season of waiting or difficulty, do not be discouraged. God is not absent. He is actively working in your life, equipping you with the strength, wisdom, and patience you will need to fulfill your purpose. The key to embracing God's preparation process is to trust Him even when things seem unclear or difficult. Understand that God's plan is always greater than our own, and His timing is perfect. Every trial you face is shaping you and positioning you for something greater. If you feel like you're being tested or you're in a season where the way forward is not clear, take a moment to reflect on how God might be using this time to prepare you. Trust that He is using every experience, even the hard ones, to refine you and make you ready for the task ahead. You may not see the fruit of your labor right now, but God is working behind the scenes. Just as He worked in the lives of Joseph and David, He is working in your life, preparing you for a mission only you can fulfill. Hold on to your faith and trust the process. Your preparation will lead you to your purpose, and when the time is right, you will step into the destiny God has for you. One of the most challenging yet powerful aspects of God's preparation process is the role of trials in shaping our character, building resilience, and testing our faith. When we go through difficult circumstances, it's easy to wonder why we must endure such hardship. However, from a biblical perspective, trials are not just random obstacles to overcome. They serve a divine purpose in preparing us for the mission God has uniquely planned for our lives. In the same way that a piece of raw metal is shaped and refined in fire, God uses trials to purify our hearts, strengthen our spirits, and build resilience. Trials test our faith, revealing areas where we may still lack trust in God or where our character needs growth. But these challenges are never meant to destroy us. Rather, they are a means by which God molds us into the individuals He has called us to be. God understands that to accomplish His purposes, we need to be spiritually strong, patient, and fully reliant on Him. Through each trial, we are stretched beyond our comfort zones, and God uses these moments to prepare us for the future He has planned. The Apostle Paul's life was filled with many trials and imprisonments, yet these hardships played an essential role in God's calling on his life. One significant example is found in Acts 16, when Paul and Silas were imprisoned in Philippi after being falsely accused. Despite the circumstances, they did not give in to bitterness or despair. Instead, they prayed and sang hymns to God while in prison, trusting that God would use their situation for His glory. In the midst of this trial, a powerful event occurred. An earthquake shook the prison, causing the chains to fall off and the doors to open. This miraculous event led to the conversion of the jailer and his entire household. Through this trial, God not only demonstrated His power, but also gave Paul and Silas the opportunity to further spread the gospel. Paul's imprisonment was not the end of his mission. It was a part of the process that refined his faith, strengthened his resilience, and expanded his ministry. God used his trials to equip him for the larger purpose of spreading the gospel to the Gentiles and building the early Christian church. Paul's ability to persevere and trust God in the face of hardship was essential to the fulfillment of his calling. Another profound example of trials and their purpose in God's preparation process is found in the story of Job. Job, a man who was known for his faithfulness to God, endured immense suffering. He lost his wealth, his children, and his health, and he experienced emotional and spiritual turmoil. Throughout these trials, Job was tested in ways that challenged his faith and understanding of God's justice and goodness. Despite his immense suffering, Job never cursed God. Instead, he questioned and wrestled with his circumstances, but ultimately he expressed his trust in God, saying, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust him." Job 1:3-1-5. Job's perseverance through his trials was key to his spiritual growth and ultimately to his restoration. In the end, God restored Job's fortunes and gave him double what he had lost. Job 4:2-10. Job's story illustrates how trials can refine a person's faith, purging doubts and strengthening their relationship with God. Through the testing, Job became more deeply aware of God's sovereignty and his own humility before God. So how does this apply to our own lives? Just as God used trials in the lives of Paul, Job, and many other biblical figures, He uses challenges in our lives to refine us and prepare us for the divine mission ahead. While it's easy to become discouraged during tough times, it's important to remember that these moments are opportunities for growth. God is not absent in our pain. He is using the trial to shape us, equip us, and draw us closer to Him. If you are currently facing a trial, it is crucial to shift your perspective. Instead of seeing the hardship as an obstacle, view it as a part of the refining process. God is preparing you for something greater. Trials test your faith and teach you perseverance, but they also help you grow in areas that are necessary for your calling. These moments can build character and resilience qualities that will be vital for the purpose God has set before you. When you feel the weight of the trial, remember that God is with you. Just as He was with Paul in prison and Job in his suffering, He is right there with you. Trust that in His time, He will bring you through the trial, and you will emerge stronger, more focused, and better equipped to fulfill your mission. Be patient and continue to lean on God's strength and wisdom as He molds you through the process. In moments of difficulty, it's important to pray and ask God to give you the strength to endure, the wisdom to learn from the experience, and the courage to keep moving forward. God uses these trials to prepare us for the greater things He has in store. So embrace the challenge, knowing that it is all part of God's perfect plan to equip you for your divine destiny. One of the most powerful ways God prepares us for the tasks ahead is through His faithfulness in our past. Often God calls us to step into new challenges that may seem daunting or even overwhelming, but it is through reflecting on His past faithfulness that we can build the confidence needed to take the next step. When we look back on the times when God has come through for us in ways big and small, it serves as evidence that He is trustworthy, capable, and fully committed to our well-being. His faithfulness becomes the foundation upon which we can confidently stand as we face new trials and walk into the unique mission He has prepared for us. Faith isn't just about believing in the unseen. It's about remembering the times when God has been faithful in our lives and drawing strength from those moments. When we are faced with something new, especially a task that requires us to rely on God, it's easy to become overwhelmed. But it is in recalling how God has previously been faithful that we can trust that He will continue to guide us through any challenge. God's faithfulness provides us with the assurance that He has already equipped us for the mission ahead. He has given us the tools, the strength, and the wisdom we need, not because of our own abilities, but because of His power working through us. And as we look back on past victories, we gain the confidence to trust Him for the future. One of the most well-known biblical examples of how God's faithfulness in the past builds confidence for the future is the story of David and Goliath. David, a young shepherd boy, faced the giant warrior Goliath who taunted the armies of Israel. At first glance, the odds were stacked against David. He was young, inexperienced in battle, and vastly outmatched by Goliath's size and skill. However, David did not fear because he remembered how God had been faithful in the past. David recounted how God had delivered him from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear while he tended his father's sheep. 1 Samuel 1:7-34-37. These past experiences of God's faithfulness gave David the courage to face Goliath. He declared, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." 1 Samuel 1:7-37. David's confidence did not come from his own strength or experience, but from the knowledge that God had been with him before and would continue to be with him in this new challenge. When David faced Goliath, he saw it not as an impossible task, but as another opportunity to see God's faithfulness manifest. This deep confidence in God's ability to deliver him allowed David to step forward in boldness. And as we know, he defeated Goliath with a single stone. Another powerful example of God's faithfulness is seen when the Israelites were trapped between Pharaoh's army and the Red Sea. Faced with what seemed like an impossible situation, the Israelites were afraid and doubted. But Moses reminded them of God's past faithfulness, and God told Moses to lift his staff over the sea, and the waters would part. The Israelites had seen God's deliverance in Egypt with the 10 plagues, but it wasn't until this moment at the Red Sea that they truly understood God's ability to provide and protect them. When God parted the waters, they walked through on dry land, and Pharaoh's army was defeated. This act of divine deliverance became a foundational story of faith for the Israelites, building their confidence in God for future battles and challenges. They learned that when God promises to lead and protect, He is faithful to do so no matter how dire the circumstances may seem. So what does this mean for us today? When we are faced with new challenges, tasks, or callings that seem beyond our capabilities, we must remember that God has been faithful in our past. Each time God has brought us through a trial, has answered our prayers, or has shown us His provision, it builds our confidence for the future. Reflect on the ways God has been faithful in your life, the times He has healed you, the ways He has provided for you, the moments when He gave you strength to overcome personal challenges. Think of the times you prayed for guidance and saw God direct your steps in miraculous ways. These memories aren't just for the past, they are meant to be the foundation of your future. When God calls you into something new, something big, and it feels overwhelming, remember the victories He has already brought you through. Just as David trusted in God's past deliverances when he faced Goliath, you can trust that the God who has been faithful before will continue to be faithful now. His faithfulness is unchanging, and He is with you every step of the way. Take a moment to recall a time when God showed up for you in a way that left you in awe of His power. Then trust that the same God is walking with you now, equipping you for the unique task He has ahead for you. Just as God gave David the courage to face a giant, He will give you the confidence to face whatever giants or obstacles lie in your path. So step forward in faith and confidence, knowing that you are not alone. God has been faithful before, and He will be faithful again. Answering God's call requires more than just willingness. It demands courage. Often God's call involves stepping into the unknown, challenging our comfort zones, and facing fears that seem insurmountable. We are called not only to hear God's voice, but also to respond in obedience even when the task ahead seems daunting or when fear and uncertainty threaten to overwhelm us. When we are called to a purpose greater than ourselves, it's easy to feel inadequate or overwhelmed by the magnitude of the mission. The world may tell us that we are too small, too inexperienced, or too weak for the task ahead. But God's call is not based on our strengths or abilities. It's based on His power and His plan. He doesn't ask us to do it alone. He equips us with the courage to move forward in faith no matter how impossible the mission may seem. Courage in God's mission is not the absence of fear but the willingness to move forward in faith, trusting that God's presence will go before us and be with us every step of the way. This courage allows us to face the unknown, take risks, and trust in God's ability to provide everything we need to succeed. One of the most powerful examples of courage in the Bible is the story of Esther. When the Jewish people were threatened with destruction, Esther, a young queen, was faced with a life-altering decision. She had the opportunity to save her people, but doing so meant risking her own life. The king, her husband, had not summoned her in a long time, and approaching him without being invited could have resulted in her death. Despite the personal danger, Esther chose to step out in faith and courage. She fasted and prayed, seeking God's guidance, and then approached the king with bravery, saying, "If I perish, I perish." Esther 4:16. Esther's courage was not born from her own strength, but from her trust in God's plan and His ability to provide the way forward. Through her courage, she was able to save the Jewish people, and God used her to bring about deliverance in a time of great peril. Esther's story shows us that sometimes we are called to risk everything for the sake of God's mission. Courage is not about the absence of fear, but about trusting God in the face of fear and stepping out to do what He has called us to do, knowing He is with us. Another example is Moses. When God called Moses to lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, Moses was reluctant. He had fled Egypt years before, and he felt unworthy and incapable of fulfilling such a monumental task. He doubted his ability to speak to Pharaoh, and he feared rejection. However, God reassured Moses, telling him that He would be with him every step of the way. Despite his hesitations, Moses took a step of faith and returned to Egypt, confronting Pharaoh and leading God's people to freedom. Moses' journey was filled with challenges, but his courage was sustained by his trust in God's presence and guidance. Like Moses, we are often called to step out of our comfort zones and face intimidating challenges, but we can take courage in knowing that God is the one who equips us. Stepping into God's call requires us to act in faith even when the task seems impossible. You may feel like Moses, unsure of how you could ever accomplish what God is calling you to do, or like Esther, faced with a choice that could cost you dearly. However, the courage to answer God's call does not come from our own ability, but from the strength He provides. Just as He gave Moses the courage to confront Pharaoh and Esther the courage to approach the king, He will give you the courage to face the challenges that lie ahead. It's important to remember that courage isn't the absence of fear. Instead, courage is the ability to move forward even in the face of fear, trusting that God is with you. When God calls you to a task, He also equips you with everything you need to succeed. The first step toward fulfilling your divine mission is saying yes to God's call even when it feels daunting. Here are some steps you can take to step forward with courage. Pray for courage. Ask God to give you the strength and confidence to step out in faith. Pray for His courage to replace any fear or doubt you may be feeling. Trust in His guidance. Just like Esther, take time to seek God's guidance through prayer and fasting. Trust that He will lead you every step of the way. Remember God's promises. Reflect on God's promises to be with you in every challenge. Meditate on passages like Isaiah 4:1-10, where God assures us, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you." Take action. Courage is not just about feeling brave. It's about taking the first step. Even when you don't have all the answers, trust that God will direct your path as you move forward. The call to fulfill God's purpose for our lives requires courage. There will be times when we feel inadequate, fearful, or unsure of our abilities, but it is in these moments that we must lean on God's strength and trust in His ability to equip us for the task ahead. Just as he gave Esther the courage to approach the king and Moses the courage to face Pharaoh, he will give you the courage you need to fulfill the unique mission he has for you. Take the step of faith today, knowing that God is with you. Trust in his provision, his strength, and his guidance, and you will see his purpose unfold in your life. Step forward in courage and embrace the mission he has called you to fulfill. One of the most profound truths in Scripture is that each of us is uniquely designed by God. Our personalities, experiences, talents, and even struggles are divinely orchestrated to play a role in the larger plan he has for our lives. The gifts and abilities you possess are not random or accidental. They are part of God's perfect design, intended to equip you for the specific mission he has called you to fulfill. God doesn't call us to missions that are beyond the scope of what he has already equipped us for. In fact, he prepares us long before the mission begins by shaping our character, developing our skills, and even allowing us to experience challenges that refine us. What you may perceive as weaknesses or challenges in your life may actually be the very qualities that enable you to fulfill the calling God has placed on your life. Each person has a unique set of gifts, whether that be in leadership, creativity, teaching, service, or other areas. These are the tools God has placed in your hands to accomplish his work. Just as a skilled craftsman uses specific tools to create a masterpiece, God uses the unique qualities in you to build his kingdom and fulfill his purposes on earth. Understanding this is crucial for stepping into your divine calling with confidence. Moses is a powerful example of how God uses our unique gifts and experiences to prepare us for a special calling. Before Moses was called to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, he had a series of life experiences that seemed disconnected and perhaps even disadvantageous. He had been raised in Pharaoh's palace, an outsider to the very people he would later be called to lead. His past included a moment of fleeing Egypt after killing an Egyptian, and he spent 40 years in the wilderness as a shepherd, seemingly distant from any mission of greatness. However, it was precisely these experiences that made Moses the right person for the job. His background as an Egyptian prince gave him access to the palace and knowledge of Egyptian culture, which would be invaluable in dealing with Pharaoh. His time in the wilderness, although it may have seemed like a period of wandering, was God's way of developing his leadership and humility. Moses had a unique relationship with God, one that was personal and intimate. This relationship and his diverse experiences were crucial in equipping him for the monumental task ahead. Moses had a unique skill set, but more importantly, he had a heart of obedience that God could use to deliver his people. Moses, initially hesitant and uncertain of his abilities, was reassured by God's promises. "I will be with you." Exodus 3:1-2. God didn't call Moses because he was the most qualified person in the eyes of others. He called Moses because Moses' unique combination of skills, experience, and relationship with God made him the perfect choice for the mission. Another example of how God uses unique gifts for his purposes is the story of David. When God chose David to be king, he was a young shepherd boy overlooked by his own family. Yet, his experiences as a shepherd, where he protected his flock from wild animals, gave him the courage and skills necessary to defeat Goliath. His gift of leadership and his deep trust in God made him the perfect candidate to lead Israel. David's story shows how God often uses what seems like mundane experiences and transforms them into powerful tools for his glory. David's courage in the face of Goliath wasn't a random act of bravery. It was the culmination of God's preparation of his heart and mind, using his experiences as a shepherd to equip him for a future role as king. In our own lives, we can be encouraged to look at the gifts and talents God has given us and recognize how he has uniquely prepared us for the calling ahead. Sometimes we may feel unqualified or overlooked, just as Moses and David did. However, we can take comfort in knowing that God doesn't make mistakes in his design for us. Your unique personality, the skills you've developed, and the experiences you've had, both good and bad, are all part of God's divine preparation. 1. Embrace your gifts. If you've ever felt insecure or unworthy because your gifts don't look like someone else's, remember that your uniqueness is part of the beauty of God's plan. Whether you have the gift of encouragement, teaching, administration, service, or creativity, these gifts are important to God's work in the world. Don't compare your gifts to others. Instead, embrace them as part of the specific mission God has for you. 2. See your struggles as preparation. Sometimes we go through challenges or seasons of feeling unprepared, but often these very struggles are shaping us, teaching us resilience, patience, and trust in God's provision. Just as God used Moses' time in the wilderness and David's time as a shepherd, God is using your experiences to build your character and equip you for His purposes. 3. Trust in God's timing. It's easy to feel discouraged when we don't see immediate results or if our gifts seem underutilized. However, God's timing is always perfect. Like Moses and David, your moment will come when God's purpose for you is revealed. Trust that every experience is a part of the journey that will lead you to fulfill the calling God has for your life. Take a moment to reflect. What are your unique talents and how can you use them to serve God? What struggles or challenges have you faced that could have prepared you for your mission? Recognize that every piece of your life is part of God's divine design, equipping you for a purpose that only you can fulfill. In conclusion, embracing your unique gifts and understanding how God uses them for His glory will give you the confidence to walk in your calling. Remember, God has specifically designed you for a mission that no one else can fulfill, and He will equip you with everything you need to succeed. Trust in His timing, trust in His preparation, and step forward with confidence into the role He has called you to fulfill. Obedience to God's will is often the pivotal factor in fulfilling the mission He has set before us. While we may not always understand the full picture or have the clarity we desire, our willingness to trust and obey God's voice is what aligns us with His perfect plan. Obedience is not about our own perfection or abilities, but about our willingness to step forward in faith, trusting that God will guide us every step of the way. When God calls us to a mission, He doesn't promise that it will be easy, but He does promise that He will be with us, and He will equip us for the task. Our part is to obey. Obedience is a declaration of trust, showing that we believe God knows best, and that His plan is worth following, even when the road ahead seems uncertain or difficult. Many times we may feel unequipped or unsure of how to accomplish the task God has set before us. However, the key to success in fulfilling His purpose is not our own strength or understanding. It's in our obedience. When we choose to obey God's direction, He provides the strength, wisdom, and resources we need. Obedience releases the fullness of God's power into our lives, enabling us to accomplish what He has called us to do. One of the clearest examples of obedience in Scripture is Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son Isaac in response to God's command. In Genesis 22, God asked Abraham to offer Isaac, the child of promise, as a sacrifice. This command was not just a test of Abraham's obedience. It was a test of his faith in God's promises. Abraham had waited for years for Isaac, and now God was asking him to give him up. Despite the overwhelming challenge, Abraham obeyed without hesitation. His obedience was a profound act of faith, trusting that God could fulfill His promises even in the most impossible of situations. As a result, God not only spared Isaac but also renewed His covenant with Abraham, promising that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky. Abraham's obedience unlocked the fulfillment of God's promises and set the stage for the blessing of future generations. Abraham's story teaches us that obedience often requires immense trust and surrender. When God asks us to step out in faith, it may seem daunting or even impossible. But as we obey, we open the door for God to reveal His promises in ways that exceed our expectations. In the New Testament, Jesus' obedience serves as the ultimate example of trust and submission to God's will. In the Garden of Gethsemane, as Jesus faced the agony of the cross, He prayed to God, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Matthew 2:6-9. Despite the pain and suffering that lay ahead, Jesus obediently submitted to the will of His Father. He knew the cost of the mission but chose to obey, knowing that His obedience would bring salvation to humanity. Through his obedience, Jesus secured our redemption and demonstrated the power of surrendering to God's plan, even when it requires great sacrifice. Just like Abraham and Jesus, we are called to obey God's instructions even when we don't fully understand the reasons or see the immediate benefits. Trusting in God's guidance, even in the unknown, is a powerful step in fulfilling the mission He has for us. Obeying God's leading requires faith, and often it requires stepping out of our comfort zones and trusting that God will provide what we need along the way. Sometimes God gives us clear instructions, and the question is not whether we understand, but whether we are willing to obey. Obedience is not just about responding when we feel ready or comfortable. It's about responding immediately when God speaks. Immediate obedience reflects trust and faith in God's plan. While obedience may come with challenges, it also brings great rewards. Just as Abraham received God's blessing after his act of obedience, and Jesus' obedience brought salvation to the world, our obedience to God opens the door for His blessings and purposes to be fulfilled in our lives. Obedience doesn't just bring success, it also brings fulfillment and joy as we align ourselves with God's will. One of the biggest barriers to obedience is the fear of not having what we need to accomplish what God has called us to do. However, when we step out in faith and obey, we can trust that God will provide. Just as He provided for Abraham and Jesus, He will provide everything we need to fulfill His mission. Our part is to trust and act in obedience. Obedience is key to fulfilling the mission God has set before us. It may not always be easy, but as we step forward in obedience, God equips us with everything we need to accomplish His purposes. We can learn from the examples of Abraham and Jesus, who both trusted God's plan even when it was difficult. When we choose obedience, we unlock the fullness of God's power, purpose, and provision in our lives. So let us follow the call with courage, knowing that God is with us every step of the way, and that He will bring His plans to fruition through our willingness to obey. One of the most difficult aspects of walking in God's purpose is understanding and trusting in His timing. We live in a world where everything is fast-paced, where instant gratification is expected, and where waiting can be seen as a hindrance to progress. However, God's timing operates on a different plane. It is perfect, complete, and always for our ultimate good. God's timing is not bound by the constraints of time as we know it. He sees the beginning from the end, and He knows exactly when to reveal or act on our mission. While we may want immediate answers or quick progress, God's plan for us unfolds gradually, and He works in ways that are often beyond our understanding. Trusting in God's timing requires patience, surrender, and the faith to know that He is never late, but always right on time. There are times when it seems like our mission or calling is taking longer to unfold than we anticipated, and we may begin to question whether we've misunderstood or missed God's plan. But it's essential to remember that God is always working behind the scenes, even when we don't see immediate results. His timing isn't about rushing us into action or fulfilling our desires according to our schedule. It's about ensuring that we are fully prepared and that everything falls into place for His glory. Jesus' life and ministry are prime examples of God's perfect timing. In the Gospel of John, when Jesus' brothers urged Him to go to Judea to perform miracles publicly, Jesus responded, "My time has not yet come," John 7:6. Jesus understood that His ministry needed to unfold according to God's divine plan, and His timing was not to be rushed by human expectations. His mission was not just to perform signs and wonders, but to carry out God's plan for salvation through His death and resurrection. Jesus' ministry took place in phases, with each step carefully orchestrated by the Father. The miracles, teachings, and even the relationships He formed were all part of God's perfectly timed plan to reveal Himself and fulfill the ultimate mission of salvation. Jesus' obedience to God's timing ultimately led to His triumph over sin and death, and He accomplished His purpose at the exact moment God intended. Jesus' willingness to wait for God's perfect timing showed that divine timing is essential in fulfilling God's will. We can trust that God's plan for our lives is just as purposeful and carefully timed, even when it feels like we are waiting for our moment. Throughout the Old Testament, we see God's promises unfolding at the exact right time. In the case of the Israelites, God's deliverance from Egypt and the fulfillment of the promises he made to Abraham were not immediate, but took place in a process that spanned generations. When Moses was called to lead the people out of Egypt, it wasn't merely a matter of human readiness. It was God's perfect timing that led to the deliverance of Israel. Similarly, the coming of the Messiah was prophesied and awaited for centuries, and Jesus' birth was precisely timed according to God's divine will. Galatians 4:4 says, "But when the set time had fully come, God sent his Son." The Israelites waited for generations for the Messiah, and when Jesus came, it was at the exact right moment when the world was ready for the message of salvation. In the midst of waiting, it's important to remember that God's process is just as valuable as the result. Whether it's waiting for the fulfillment of a dream, the revelation of a specific calling, or the arrival of a breakthrough, we can trust that God is using every moment of waiting to prepare us. The delays we experience often aren't setbacks, but moments of growth, refinement, and alignment with God's will. While waiting for our mission to unfold, it's vital that we stay active in our faith journey. Like Jesus, we may need to wait for the right moment to step into our calling. During this waiting period, we should be focusing on becoming more like Christ, growing in our relationship with God, and aligning our hearts with His purpose. We should look at waiting not as a passive experience, but as an active time of preparation, spiritual growth, and increased trust in God. If you feel like your mission or purpose is taking longer to unfold than expected, take it as an opportunity to deepen your prayer life. God is refining you, and persistent prayer helps align your heart with His will. Prayer is not only about asking for things to happen, it's about listening to God's voice, discerning His timing, and being receptive to the work He is doing in you. The hardest part of waiting on God is trusting that His timing is better than our own. It's easy to grow impatient, wondering why things aren't happening according to our timeline. But we can take confidence in knowing that God sees the bigger picture. His timing ensures that everything will unfold at the perfect moment, in the way that brings the most glory to Him and the greatest blessing to us. Just as Jesus' ministry unfolded in stages, so too will your calling and purpose. Sometimes you may not fully understand why things are taking longer, but trust that God is at work. In His perfect timing, He will open the doors for you to step into your destiny. Even if things feel delayed, know that God is preparing the perfect conditions for your mission to come to fruition. God's timing is perfect, and when we trust in His process, we can rest assured that He is never late. Like Jesus, who was obedient to the Father's timing, we are called to trust that the moment will come when we are fully ready to step into the mission God has set for us. While waiting may be difficult, it is an integral part of the journey that leads us to our divine calling. Trust in God's timing, knowing that He is working behind the scenes to bring everything together at just the right moment for His glory. As we've explored today, God is preparing you for a unique and significant mission, one that only you can accomplish. Your calling is tailored specifically to you, and although the journey may involve challenges and waiting, God is actively working in your life, refining you for the task ahead. His preparation process, although sometimes difficult, is essential to equipping you with the faith, strength, and courage needed to fulfill your divine purpose. The key is to trust in His preparation, embrace the call He has placed on your life, and step forward in obedience. When you do this, you can be confident that He is with you every step of the way, guiding and empowering you to accomplish the mission He has set for you. I encourage you to take a moment to reflect on your own life and seek God's direction. Ask Him to reveal to you your unique purpose, and pray for the courage to embrace it fully. If you're in a season of waiting or preparation, trust that God is using this time to equip you for what's to come. Step forward with obedience, knowing that He is molding you for a mission that only you can fulfill. If this message has encouraged or inspired you, I invite you to share this video with others who may need to hear that God is preparing them for something special. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more teachings and encouragement on walking in God's will and fulfilling your divine calling. Remember, God is always working in your life, preparing you for a purpose that is greater than you can imagine. Trust His process and move forward in faith.